Welcome everyone. My name is Ron Stoffel, known as the Numbers Guy, and this is the Numbers Guy Show. And I have today a guest with us, and the topic of the day is going to be on property taxes. And Rolf Erickson, who is my guest today, thank you, Rolf, for coming in and joining
You're
us.
welcome.
And with our viewers, we're going to be talking about the property taxes, specifically in Hennepin County. Rolf is an expert in that area, and I will introduce him and kind of let him give you a little background on his professional background to make him kind of an expert in this area, and then we're going to answer some basic questions and give you viewers an opportunity to maybe better understand your property taxes and hopefully go to your government and ask the questions that need to be. So, Rolf, if you kind of give us a little background on yourself and the business that you belong or that you do and how that's connected with Hennepin County property taxes.
Okay. Well, I am a private property tax assessor, and I contract with cities to do their tax assessing work. I started off as an employee at Hennepin County in 1974, which is approximately 38 years ago, and I've worked in this field ever since then. 5 years I was a county employee. Then I got the chance to contract with cities, and I started out with 2 other county employees, and we actually had 5 contracts at the time. And in 1984, I had 4 more cities come to me and ask if I could be their assessor. I really didn't seek them out. They just wanted to have a private assessor and apparently liked the way we did things. And I had those cities till 1998, and then I cut back some because I was having a hard time keeping appraisers working for me because the economy was so good. They all wanted to go and be private appraisers. So my expertise is in administering the property tax laws as far as valuing and classifying properties for ad valorem taxes. And in doing so, of course, we have to be able to explain to the citizens of the towns that we work for what exactly, say, the sample, a proposed notice means, what do the lines on a tax statement mean. So we have to be able to explain this. But I do come heavily from the valuation end of things and not from the policy end of setting the tax rates and the not the mill rates anymore, but the tax capacity rates.
Okay, all right. And what we will have too is the Hennepin County has a sample proposal notice. And part of what we're going to talk about a little bit with Rolf is kind of how those things come into existence. I think Rolf understands too that the process that the citizens get involved in is at the end of the process. Get your input a little bit on that as to how that is, and then how the whole process of the system works, because I know we have different classifications, some basic ones, and then multiple ones under that. So why don't we start with a basic as to the types of property classifications that are out there. I think residential, commercial, agricultural, and I guess the 4th one I'm not as familiar with. So maybe you could enlighten everybody on what those are, so everybody kind of knows that there are kind of 4 pots that they're getting money from.
Yeah, I think you hit them all, and unfortunately, on the last one, I'm not thinking of that right now either, but it is the 4 types in the agricultural, commercial, residential, and there's miscellaneous properties like airport hangars, personal property, and other things like that too. We end up working more with the subclasses, which are anywhere between 51 and 55 subclasses.
Wow.
Yeah, it's something, and it's so complicated. Each one is a special program usually for a property type.
Okay, so most of the people that'll be watching probably are more interested in residential, but overall, maybe in Hennepin County, maybe you don't know, but does a residential pay the majority, or is it commercial, or is it kind of split between the 3 major categories in Hennepin County? Because again, agriculture probably is getting further and further out in Hennepin County. I would think that that's probably becoming less of an issue, but I think that's an issue that is always out there as to residential people think that they're paying the most. I think the commercial, I think there's that tension going on.
As far as the actual amount as a percentage of your value or an effective tax rate, commercial and industrial are the highest.
Okay.
I do not know the exact breakdowns of how much residential total puts in, commercial puts in, apartment puts in, duplexes, triplexes, but all residential, they have something that they called a house as a house a while ago, and so the rate on a residence is basically 1%. Now, if the residence is worth more than $500,000, it goes to a second tier of taxation on that. But the commercial, in simple terms, pays about 3 times the property tax as a residential on the same valuation. Agricultural is not a big factor in Hennepin. It's getting less and less because we're looking at most of the property still being on a program called Green Acres, which is a deferment program. And although the ag values have been going up now because of the corn prices and everything, we were still looking at not the majority of taxes coming from that. And then everything, all the other classes, say the airport hangars on personal property, and these are a small part of it, mobile homes and that type of thing.
Okay, all right.
So,
now, from a standpoint of the process, and I think you probably understand, is the legislature has created all the statutes, which all of the counties, the cities and stuff have to abide by.
Right.
I'm assuming that they have then levying authority. Hennepin County, we'll use it as an example, has the ability to levy based on their budget, how much money they want to bring in.
Right.
That usually is set, and then it's somehow spread over the values in each one of those to actually get the property tax to an individual property. Is that kind of the basic, or is there something different there?
Until 1988, I believe that the county or the state or the city would set, not the state, I'm sorry, the city or the county would set their actual mill rate. And when they set the rate, it was just taken to the tax base, and then that figured out what the taxes were. And in 1988, it was changed to a system called tax capacity. The idea of that was that the cities would put out a budget amount that they needed, so everybody could see that, to say they needed $1 million or $2 million instead of just a rate, which meant nothing to them. And this was supposed to be around 100%. And so it would be like 1% of the value on a residence. I know it still gets confusing, but the idea behind it was that it was going to limit the taxes somewhat to around that 1% mark. What had ended up happening with it then is that the cities ended up needing more money, and the laws switched and the laws changed, and so it ended up taxes being a little bit more. Now, I'm a little bit off track on that, so with your question, if you'd repeat that again.
Okay, it's kind of, so that everybody understands, is really the city or the county kind of sets what they want.
They set their budget.
Right, and then that's applied somehow in a formula to your house. And in other words, different like what you were talking about before, where it was a mill rate and then the city had to live with the amount of money coming in. It's kind of like they're doing it from the top down. We're going to determine how much we want, and then we're going to find out how much your taxes are going to be.
Yeah, they do that. Now, the way it applies actually to a house is the assessor would go out and value the house, and everybody says, how is my house valued? Well, the law says that the property needs to be valued at market value, and market value has a law and definition, but essentially it's an arm's length sale, which means it's between non-related parties and there's no duress involved, and it's usually for cash. Anyway, once the assessor sets that value, and it can be done any number of ways, by the size of the house or by market comparables. Usually it's done on a mass appraisal system. Once that's set, then the tax capacity, say for a residence, is 1% of that market value. On a commercial property, it's 1.5% of the first, I forget the amount, 100,000, I think, 150,000, and then another percentage over that. Okay, so when you get these tax capacities set, then each property has an amount set, and all these are added together. And so when you have this tax capacity, you have the budget, basically you're dividing the tax capacity amount by the budget, and it's spreading that to the different properties by this amount. So if your tax capacity, let's just say your tax rate is 100%. So if your tax capacity, you had a $100,000 house, 1% of 100,000 would be $1,000. Theoretically, your tax would be $1,000. If your commercial property, if your tax capacity, well, that gets a little more complicated, but it would be the spread by that tax capacity times the tax rate at this time, which would be 1. And I'm sorry if we get off on that.
No, and we're trying to keep it basic, but numbers and stuff, you know, does help. So examples like that is great. So in your field, then do you then have to, when you're doing the appraisals, also go in when a taxpayer challenges that? Is that something that you do, or is that something that the city or the county does?
There's 3 appeals, essentially. And what happens is each year, like right now, we're doing the assessment for January 2nd, 2013. That's the assessment date. That's the date all values are set as of. So once that is set, turned into the county a little bit after that date, they do their studies on it and approve it. Then there's a set of hearings that people can go to protest the new value. Now the thing is hard for people is they look at it and they say, oh, my value went down, you know, it was $100,000, now it's $95,000. It doesn't tell them what their taxes are going to be. So this is when the actual hearings are, when the assessor can do something about it, about valuation. There's called a local board of review, or in some cases where the county is the assessor for the city, they have what's called an open book. An open book hearing, nothing happens there, and they would go on to the next step. So at any rate, you go to this local board of review, you say to the council, my house is overvalued, this is why, I have an appraisal, I have something else. The assessor would show their evidence, and then the council would make up their mind and say, okay, Mr. Jones, Mrs. Jones, I'm going to cut your value 5% or whatever they choose to do. They can they can change the whole city up to 1%. But that's all on an individual basis. Then the next appeal is through the county. It's the same type of thing, only it's a little more in depth. And then the final appeal that you can do anytime up until the 30th of the year, April 30th of the year that the taxes are due, is to actually file an appeal in tax court. And this is the problem with all of this. Even just sitting here talking about this, I know I'm confusing people, because when you talk, and
that's why we're bringing this up. Is it's not an easy subject, but you have to start with something. So I want to try to give people some information on it, so that at least they have an understanding, and then we can follow up with another show or something, maybe more generally as to how you might go about the process, because I think that would be important to people. Having the experience you have on how the process would go and how appeals would go and how you need to do that. So this is kind of basic. So
well, right now, cities are setting their budgets right now, but the proposed property tax statement comes out in November. The budgets are really set by then, and so and your appeal is really done except for tax court on your property value.
Right.
So by the time this is all done, it's pretty much a moot point, except if you go to tax court. But what I'm saying is that that's the first time when you get this proposed property tax bill in November, what your new taxes are going to be. And people have been finding out that their taxes have been going up and their values have been going down a little bit.
Right.
So the hardest thing for people to do is to go in and protest what they're doing, because it's split into the 2 pieces, the valuation, and there's actually the only time to protest on the tax of the house is to go to this truth and taxation hearing and go to your city council, your county, and say, look, I think you're spending too much. And these meetings no one goes to these meetings. They're very poorly attended.
Yeah. And I've gone to them also, mostly for the school district, which everybody knows that I'm active in. And yeah, and I go to the school board meetings that they set the budgets, and and the cities are no different. They go in, they determine what they are, and then they have what I consider to be a ability for the citizens to go and complain about it after the fact. The numbers are already set, and they may decrease it a little bit here and there, because usually what I found is they have to set for this to be done, for the proposed statements to come out, they have to do what they think the proposed levy is going to be. And usually they go as high as they can on it, and then they have something to go back to, because my understanding is they can decrease it without doing anything. If they increase it, they have to go back for a vote of the whole council or the school board or whatever. So they always go high, and then they can manually bring it down at the next, which is usually the meeting right after the school district. They come in at 5 to 6, and then they have their meeting to approve it at 6 to 7. So you can know that the impact that you had on this in that 1 hour is probably going to change a lot of minds, which is nothing. Yeah. They've already determined what it's going to be, and they hear it's a venting more than I think a procedure. So, What I think the next thing would be to talk about is kind of transitioning into taking your expertise, and now you have decided to run for a Hennepin County Commission seat in the 2nd District. So why don't you tell us a little bit about maybe why you've decided to run, and then what area of Hennepin County, because I know that there are 7 districts that are in Hennepin County, and you're in the 2nd. So, so for people to understand if they're in your district or not, some of the things I'm sure you'll talk about affects all of Hennepin County, but why don't you tell us a little bit about why you're running and where you're running at?
Well, I'm running for District 2, Hennepin County Commissioner, and District 2 consists of southeastern Plymouth, Medicine Lake, Golden Valley, North Minneapolis, Northeast Minneapolis, and St. Anthony. I'm running because I'm not happy with government. It's top-heavy, and I believe that many politicians, when they look at their job, they look at the people to serve them instead of serving the people as they're supposed to do as a public servant, politicians, and some people as employees also. So my wife and I decided together that the way to try to do something was to get into a local race, and we chose to go into this race on the last day of filing, but we still chose to go into it, hoping that we could make a difference in the way things are done. Now, you ask how does that relate to property taxes? Because the Hennepin County Board can't really vote on the law, but as a county commissioner, I would work diligently to put together groups of people interested in the property tax system. And I say that it would be local council people, it would be school district people, county people, and to work with the state legislature, senators and representatives to actually get our property tax system, and we call it RPT, and we call that reform property taxes. Is what we're saying we want to do. So,
now in your past, you said you have been doing this for 30+ years.
Right.
Have you ever had a commissioner ask your input on property taxes? I would consider you an expert in the field, and I'm wondering if anybody has ever come to you, because this sounds like possibly a unique going out and asking some people kind of the property taxes as opposed to just implying and imposing it on people.
Well, as a citizen, I have not been asked my opinion by a county commissioner on anything, including property taxes, ever that I can remember. I can say that when I was a county employee, John Darris, who was at the time was a county commissioner, used to come around and ask the employees how they were doing and everything, and if there was anything they needed and that type of thing. But as far as it goes, being asked, I would probably not be the one they'd ask about policy. They'd ask the county assessor. So anytime a question comes in, they'd ask the county assessor, who does a good job of taking care of that. But again, as far as ever being asked any opinion on any county matter, I do not recall that ever. And I've talked to people in my knocking on doors and things, and I've not found anyone yet who's ever been asked for a survey or an opinion on it.
Okay. And obviously this show is in Hennepin County, so hopefully everybody is familiar. If I remember correctly, the last budget that I saw for Hennepin County was in excess of $1.5 billion. Is that in the ballpark for the amount?
Yes.
And that's an annual budget. That isn't like the state where we have a biannual.
No.
This is every year that they're spending $1.5 billion of our tax money.
A little closer to 1.6, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess, are there areas that you, as you're campaigning and talking to people, that are areas that you would look at for maybe reform and maybe trying to reduce some of those costs?
Well, I have several proposals that I would like to bring into action if I'm elected. And one of the main things is that I have a plan that would enhance government services by rewarding employees for suggestions that would make the job more streamlined. So what I'm saying is, say if you have a nurse who comes up with an idea of $100,000 savings in record keeping. Maybe it would be something where you could use an iPhone for a doctor and they just shoot a QR code or something, and they could just streamline this process. Then that nurse would get 10%. She'd get $10,000, and 5% would go to her pension fund if it was a union pension fund or the state pension fund or anything else like that. Because I firmly believe that without getting the employees involved and on board, there's no way that we're going to have enhanced delivery of our government services. And we need to do that. So, and I honestly believe that you could trim 15, maybe 20% off the entire county budget if you would do this, and you would work on unfunded mandates, which take a lot of the people's time, a lot of the employees' time to do.
Now, how about the interaction between Hennepin County, the cities, and the Met Council? That seems to be something that I've heard some things about that seems to be kind of an intergovernmental type of organization. That we have the Met Council, which is appointed by, I think, the governor, not elected, but they have impact on policy procedures of both the cities and the Hennepin County. What do you think of their role and how that currently, and if there are any changes that you would make in that relationship?
Well, I'm not, the governor appoints the Met Council, so directly there's not a lot that the county commissioner could do to change that. I personally feel that many of the functions that the Met Council is doing should be done directly by the county. I would work toward doing that, and I certainly think that many of these functions that they do should not be done by appointed people on a board. I'm not an expert on it. But
I know that there's interaction that goes on, and obviously also between the Hennepin County and the cities that obviously they represent. That you know, I know the Hennepin County Sheriff handles emergency type activities and stuff, which I'm assuming comes up through the Hennepin County commissioners, and the sheriff, you know, negotiate with the cities if that's efficiency, which I think is probably good from that standpoint of putting together where it makes sense cost-effective ways of handling, you know, services, that rather than having each individual city doing those types of things.
Well, many of the cities contract with the sheriff's office to actually do their police work, as do many of the cities contract with the assessor's office to do their work. And I think that does result in some savings, but again, I don't have the figures on it.
Okay. Now, going back to information that you're kind of gathering as you're block walking and stuff, is there 4 or 5 different items that you seem to be getting the same either information or complaints on regarding the county, or is it kind of all over the board when you're doing it, just to kind of get a feel for what people are telling you?
I believe what I hear most is just the amount of taxes. And I don't hear a lot of other things in the areas that I'm talking to, but almost everybody is concerned with the amount of spending, and they're concerned with the fact that it keeps going up and up. And that's what I really hear most of.
Okay. Now, you do have, I think, a primary coming up relatively shortly here. How many people are running for this particular seat for the 2nd district?
The primary is on August 14th. There's 9 people running for this district, and it's interesting that about 4 of these people have got substantial involvement. They've either worked for the government, and 4 of them actually have been elected officials for quite a long time. So I guess I would term them as professional politicians. And I can give you a rundown of what each one of them are briefly if you want.
If you want to, we've got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
So.
Well, if you start from the east, there's Steve Dealer. He lives in St. Anthony, and he's one of the candidates, and he was a mayor, I believe, in St. Joseph, Minnesota, and he also was in the state legislature for a number of years. I don't have the exact number of years, And he describes himself as a conservative progressive, and he does not think that it's good to associate with any political party and you can serve your constituents better. Then there's Leslie Davis, who is from northeast Minneapolis, I believe. And Leslie has some rather unique plans for capital financing and taxing water. And then if you move to North Minneapolis, you have Linda Higgins, who is a longtime legislator and employee. She also, generally the people who have been legislators already, their policy when you talk to them is to throw more money at something to fix it for a government solution. But anyway, Linda Higgins, let's see, Tanya Johnson is another candidate, and she's an entrepreneur. She's a very interesting candidate. She has her own business, and she would like to have kids learn entrepreneurship early. Let's see, then there's Don Samuels dropped out of the race. Roger Smithrud is also another candidate from North Minneapolis, and he hasn't too much of a candidacy that I've seen, but he's seems to be a common sense type of person. Then Blon Yang I've not met, and he's also from North Minneapolis. I don't have a lot of background on him. Then you move over to Golden Valley, there's Paula Pentel, who has been, I guess, she's been a local professional politician. She's also an instructor at the university, and so she's worked with the government for a long time. And finally move over to Plymouth, and besides me, there's Kathleen Murdoch, who has been on the city council. I think she's been in politics. I think she ran for county commissioner in the seat one time in 2002.
Okay.
And so she's the last candidate that there is there. But again, I would say that the candidates that have been in government seem to have the idea that government can fix things. And there are some that have not been in it that think there's other solutions. And that I believe that we need to look out of the box for our solutions, because that's the only way we're going to get government that serves the people and doesn't expect to be served. You know, it doesn't expect the people to serve them.
Now this is, if I remember right, is an open seat, so there's no incumbents.
No incumbent.
running?
No,
Okay.
Mark Senglin stepped down to take a job with Minneapolis, and it's again August 14th with 9 of us in this, and I'm optimistic that with that many people in there that we can get enough votes to at least get past this.
And how many people go to the general election out of those
2.
9?
Top
Only
2.
Okay, so out of 9, only 2 of them will go on to the general election.
That's correct.
Okay. I guess in the last minute or so that we've got here, anything else that you want to tell the viewers about yourself and you know why you think you are the best candidate, and obviously make sure that everybody goes out on August 14th and votes, or if you're not going to be in town, get an absentee ballot.
No, I'd just say that I've had the experience being a government employee. I'm also a former union member, and I also have been an independent contractor. I'm a realtor. I've had broad experience, but my experience is from the inside on government. I know how employees think, and I've worked with the county and the local government, and I have, at least I think I have some kind of an idea how the elected officials think, because I have to walk a tightrope between the citizens and the elected officials. And so I think that gives me a different perspective, not being a professional politician and having seen this from the inside.
Okay, all right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there, but I appreciate Ralph coming in, and hopefully all you viewers out there will look at Ralph and the other candidates and go and vote. You know, it's important for everybody to vote. It is our only way that we are able to change it. So this is Ron Stoffel and Rolf Erickson for The Numbers Guy, and we'll be seeing you again. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.